Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
Welcome into the Can't Wait podcast. Tim McMaster here, along with Zack Rosenblatt, our Jets reporter at The Athletic, and our producer extraordinaire, Marissa Dunn. This is kind of an emergency podcast. Basically, we were looking for an excuse to record a podcast. The Reddick deal broke, Friday afternoon before Easter. I was out of state without a microphone. It just didn't make sense to, jump on. So Stefon Diggs got traded today. It impacts the Jets, obviously. We decided that was as good enough a reason as any to hop on and record the latest episode of the Can't Wait podcast. So thank you all for joining us live if you're doing that on YouTube. Or if you're catching up with us a little bit later in the audio version. We're going to get into Diggs. We'll get into Reddick, some other stuff going on around the Jets. How was everybody doing? How are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the lull because it seems like every time I think it's coming, there's not one. Like my editor Allison was off last week, and she comes back and she's like, "I see things were nice and loud last week because you had like the Woody Robert Salah stuff. You had the Haason Reddick trade on Friday at 4 p.m."
It was a good Friday for the Jets.
See what you
Hey, there you go. And the weather's been crappy these days. It's been raining like every day.
Yeah.
Can't catch a break. But yeah, life's good, so can't complain too much.
So speaking of the weather, life story. Ailey does forest school, which is in Central Park, in the North Woods of Central Park, where it's like really not the not what people think of as Central Park. It's actually like the wilderness in the woods. So it's a once a week thing. It's like 2 hours, and it doesn't matter what the weather is. They do it. So she has this, I wish I had said in a picture, but she has this full body like rain suit that's still too big. It's amazing. But anyway, so it was good. But
I was just looking up raincoats for my dog today.
Came back soaked. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting here like waiting for them to come back. But
nice and cozy and warm.
I was just looking up raincoats for my dog today because it's getting annoying that so I have to walk her, whether it's rain or shine. So I always see all these dogs with all these cute jackets on. So I'm like, all right, I got to get my dog a raincoat. So I've been looking them up.
Okay, well, Madison doesn't have a raincoat. So if your dog and Ailey has one, I think I have to get her one too.
Let's get Can't Wait branded raincoats.
Yeah, there you go.
Or you just don't go outside with her, which is a fair option as well.
That's much better.
Yeah, I'm ready for some sunshine though.
All right, let's talk some Jets. Let's talk some Stefon Diggs, who is making the move from cold and snowy Buffalo to the warm weather and indoor facilities down in Houston, Texas. He is traded to the Texans. Another weapon for CJ Stroud. This obviously impacts the Jets more on the other side of it with the Bills, but here's the deal. A second round pick next year's draft, 2025, and a fifth round pick in the 2025 draft. That's what the Bills get back. The Texans get Diggs. They've also added Joe Mixon. They already have Nico Collins and Tank Dell. It's 4 more years of Diggs on that deal that he has signed. So let's quickly talk about the Texans, who are quickly becoming a force in the AFC, I think, Zack.
Yeah, they're doing what teams with a star quarterback on a rookie contract should do more often. I think some get to a little afraid to give up assets and stuff like that, but they're going all in around CJ Stroud. They struck gold on their head coach too last year. So I think they're all in and trying to be a contender immediately, which I don't know that maybe that would have been their plan this offseason if last season didn't go the way it did. I think CJ was even better than they could have expected. So
I mean, it's been quick.
Yeah, it's been quick. So you add Diggs to a receiver room that already looked very good with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. They loaded up on defense. They signed Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry. They signed a couple other guys on defense. I don't have the names in front of me, but they're all in on winning this year, and they didn't really give up that much for Stefon Diggs, frankly. I know that he's, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it makes some sense because he's 30. His contract, as you mentioned, it goes for a long time, and it's pretty significant. The Bills had to get off that money, which so there was appeal to them to maybe not take as much back if somebody was willing to just take him off their hands, kind of thing. I don't know what the Bills are doing. We'll get into that obviously, but the Texans, Yeah, as someone just said, the Texans are what the Jets were supposed to be. Yeah, that's kind of like, if Zach Wilson had worked out, because I mean, same defense, 49ers coaching tree. They did lose. They tried getting Saquon too, by the way. People forget that already. They were the favorite to get him. Everything I heard leading up to it, and they settled for Joe Mixon, who's like a solid running back. They'll be fine with him. And they just they're loaded, and they still are going to be able to add. They don't have a first round pick because they traded it to get Will Anderson last year, and he was the defensive rookie of the year. But they're going to be able to keep adding talent. Nick Caserio, I think, has done an amazing job. I think early on he was getting dinged because it was like a mess there with like the Jack Easterby and all that stuff. But I think he's done a great job of doing a lot of short-term deals to keep them flexible at the cap, and they're able to go and make a move like this. And now they have a number one receiver in Diggs. I think a guy who's a number one talent in Nico Collins, and they have a really, really good defense, a really good head coach, an up-and-coming offensive coordinator. Like they have, like you said, like it literally is like all the pieces that the Jets were supposed to have. You had Mike LaFleur in place of Bobby Slowick before, Salah in place of D'Amico Ryans. Like it's kind of funny to see the parallels, and it really is amazing that if you just strike on the quarterback, how much of a difference that makes. Like that's everything. Like if they're fielding Bryce Young, they're not going all in this offseason probably, or maybe they are like the Panthers and they're just trying to overpay guys to surround a quarterback who didn't show anything with talent. But you get CJ Stroud, and all of a sudden your future looks a little brighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's they're going to be fun to watch for sure. All right, so the Bills side of this, it's not just Diggs who's left the building, right? Tre'Davious White is gone, Jordan Poyer's gone, Mitch Morse is gone. This is a roster that has taken a serious hit. Obviously, they still have the quarterback, and they still have some weapons. The Bills are, I think, going to be a good team, but the last 3 years we've said the Bills should be in the Super Bowl, and they haven't. And now I'm not sure we're going to be saying that leading into 2024.
Yeah, I'm very curious I don't really understand the pivot. I mean, I guess they're trying to save some money. They did get rid of some older guys. I think they maybe don't view like the Poyers of the world as like big of a loss as maybe it seems, just because there's like all these big guys they're getting rid of. And at the end of the day, they have the quarterback. He's the best quarterback in the division, one of the best in the league. And so they're going to be in it as long as they have Josh Allen. But I mean, Josh Allen can't be happy looking around seeing what his top receiver right now is Curtis Samuel, who's a slot receiver. Who they signed this offseason. They have Khalil Shakir, who's just like a fast guy. They have Dalton Kincaid at tight end, who they drafted in the first round last year. They have James Cook at running back, and they have a pretty solid offensive line. But, they just traded a number one receiver, and, maybe they have a plan to replace him. Maybe they're going to make a splash. Maybe they'll draft somebody. They have a later draft pick because they've been winning. They've won the division 4 years in a row. But like on paper, and I have a story coming out about this tomorrow that I'm sure is going to anger some Bills and Dolphins fans. Patriots fans, I think, are pretty depressed right now, so nobody's even talking about them because they've had the weirdest offseason beyond the losing Belichick. But
nothing like setting your new coach up for success by not adding anything.
When they keep putting their foot in their mouth, it's like they've acted like the Jets usually do on this offseason. They're like, yeah, we're going to spend, we're going to get weapons at receiver, and they've done like none of that, so they look like a mess. But yeah, so I really do think on paper, and again, it's just on paper, that the Jets do have the best roster in the AFC East. Again, like if you're weighting quarterback, I think the Bills, you could argue, still have the best team just because they have Josh Allen. But healthy Aaron Rodgers, you fix the offensive line in theory. You add Mike Williams, who in theory is a great number two. The defense is still loaded at all levels, and you just added Haason Reddick, who we're going to get into, is maybe the best pass rusher in the division already, and a guy that I never expected them to go after, although it seems like they were in since the beginning. But I just think, I went position by position for the story I did, and defensively they were at or near number one in almost every spot. I think they have the best running back in the division in Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson doesn't really stack up with the Dolphins receivers. Like they're always going to win that battle. But the Dolphins also have kind of taken a step back, I think, roster-wise. They've gotten rid of a lot of guys. They've lost some offensive linemen. So, the Jets are famous for winning the offseasons a lot. It doesn't ultimately matter much. It would be the most set up for disappointment thing ever if everybody's like, okay, we're the best team in the division, and then whatever, the Bills are good anyway, or something happen, or the Dolphins go off, or the Patriots are better than it. Whatever's can go wrong will, you generally assume, with the Jets, and they have so much risk on their roster, obviously, questions about their coaching staff, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, I just think on paper this is the most talented Jets roster in a long time, and I think the most talented roster in this division. You're on mute, Tim.
Sorry, Marissa.
It's okay.
Let's dive into Reddick then. This is a guy who's, you could still say he's in his prime, right? 29 years old. It's a conditional 6th round pick to Philly. You could almost say that the Jets traded Bryce Huff in a 6th round pick to Philly for
third round pick, conditional 3rd round pick.
Conditional. Oh, right. I'm sorry. But it's interesting the way this whole thing plays out with Huff going to the Eagles and then Reddick comes back. Final year of his deal. Reports that he wanted $25 million per year in an extension. Can't imagine that's coming from the Jets. So in a lot of ways, Zach, this does feel like a 1-year rental from Reddick to fill a void. And then, I mean, you do think that at some point Will McDonald has to step up and be a 1st round pick type talent. So now you've kind of given him some more runway here, where he'll not be depended upon for basically 2 years before he'll have to step up. But just sum up the deal for us beyond what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a few different angles to it, but it's a clear sign out of all the moves they've made. I mean, if you combine it with the Tyron Smith contract and the Mike Williams contract, they're very clearly not committing any money beyond this year. They're going all in on this year. I shouldn't say they're not committing money beyond this year. A lot of these contracts are structured where they're going to be paying these guys, when they're not even under contract anymore. But Joe Douglas has very clearly just gone all in. He's taken some risks on some guys with some injury questions and stuff like that. Reddick, I think, is the least risky guy he added. And the most surefire, I don't think there's even a way you can criticize that move, other than if you want to say why didn't you just re-sign Bryce Huff,
right?
Who's younger. But I think Haason Reddick is better right now than Bryce Huff is, and Bryce Huff could become Haason Reddick, but you have Reddick right now, who's 4th in sacks in the NFL the last 4 years, was 4th in Defensive Player of the Year voting 2 years ago. He's an absolute stud, and I'm more curious about I guess you kind of get it because the Eagles were clearly going younger there and they value Bryce Huff, but it's just so fascinating that these two wound up on the opposite teams too, because now everybody's going to compare how both those guys do this year, and it's going to reflect poorly on one team and better on the other team. And the Eagles didn't really get that much for him if you think about it, because it's a 3rd round pick next year, and he just needs, if he plays, I think it's what is it? I don't have it in front of me. I'm blanking on the percentage of snaps and 10 sacks. He has to get both of them in order
60 something percent.
Yeah, I think 65% or 67.5%. I'll pull it up in a minute, but he has to get that and 10 sacks in order for it to become a 2nd round pick next year, which obviously is if it doesn't work out and Joe Douglas isn't here, then that's not really his problem anyway. So I don't know. I was taken aback by this one. They clearly felt that edge rusher was a need. They were going after, first they tried getting Shaq Barrett. They hosted Jadeveon Clowney. I get the impression they might not have signed Clowney right away because they were looking into Reddick. I think Reddick was once they found out that the Eagles were letting Reddick explore a trade, they were into it. And once being clear that he'd be willing to come here and play on a 1-year deal, I think they were willing to do it too. They're basically paying him $15 million this year, which is not bad for an elite pass rusher. So, they arguably upgraded at defensive end now. All of a sudden, that already was a great group when they had Bryce Huff. I'm very curious to see what that rotation looks like with JFM, JFM, Jermaine Johnson, and Haason Reddick, which is a great trio. And like you mentioned, there's the Will McDonald angle, which is a big part of this too.
Duncan McLean mentioned actually in the chat, it's actually a 2026 3rd round pick, not even next year.
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah,
2 years from now, and it is 65% of the snaps. As far as that goes,
65, yes. So yeah, it's a great trade. Absolute home run. I think. I thought they should have kept Bryce Huff. He's 25 years old. You lock that guy in long term, and you roll with it. They decided they didn't want to commit long term, and they wanted to let him test the market. He got more money, I think, per year than Reddick is technically making for the Jets this year. So, it was a risk they were willing to take. They view Haason Reddick as a better player. They added a better player, and they're a team that's all in on this year, and they're a team that thinks they're going to be having a lot of pass rushing opportunities. So, if Reddick breaks those thresholds and makes it a 2nd round pick, you can live with that because of that production and how much he played. And it's the same thing with Smith.
And your trip to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and your trip to the Super Bowl. And the same thing with the Tyron Smith deal, the same thing with the Mike Williams deal. If they reach these thresholds, then that means everything went well. So, the defense was going to be elite without Haason Reddick, and now I don't see any way it's not. assuming they have the same amount of luck in terms of injuries that they had the last couple of years, which I can't imagine they will. But yeah, I don't know. It's just not what I expected. And Jadeveon Clowney, I think his deal he signed with the Panthers was for 2 years, $20 million, which is pretty reasonable ultimately if you look at the player. But Reddick's a better player than Clowney's a better run stopper, which I think is a factor. Like Reddick isn't as good in run defense. I think he had a cold spell early last season. But just think on passing downs, they could roll out a group that includes Jermaine Johnson and Haason Reddick and JFM and Quinton Williams, and you can even throw in Will McDonald as an extra pass rusher or like some creativity, and it just gives Jeff Ulbrich so much he could do. I think they still need to add a safety, but otherwise they're in really good shape on defense. But yeah, Will McDonald, I think we should talk about. On one hand, you can view this as a negative because it's pretty clear sign that they don't believe he can like step in for Bryce Huff this year yet. Like they don't think he's ready. But on the other hand, while it's not ideal to have your first round pick from a year ago be the fourth defensive end and probably not really playing all that much, in terms of his development, this will wind up being a good thing. I think, he's going to learn from Haason Reddick. He's going to be able to just be a pass rusher this year. I think if they're winning games or they have leads in games, he'll have chances to rush the passer. So you can build him into basically like you built Bryce Huff up. And again, it was a bad pick at the time. We said it at the time, and we'll say, and it's even more obvious now, but you have the player now, so you have to do what's best for the player. So I still think Will can be a good player, and this just gives him less pressure. And if somebody gets hurt, you have a first round pick from last year on the roster. Still have Michael Clemens. So I think this will be a good thing in the long run for Will McDonald, even if it's frustrating in the moment, because they could have Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, any of those guys that they passed on to draft a defensive end that barely played. But while he maybe isn't ready for a full-time role, I think he can become a pass rush specialist like Bryce Huff was. And I think that's not the worst thing.
All right, let's talk about the draft. Easy transition there. By the way, Jeff Howe gave them an A- for the trade on The Athletic. He's doing the trade grades for us now. So gave a B the other way to the Eagles. All right, so all these deals, everything that's happened this offseason so far really puts the Jets in a great place as far as the draft goes, right? They've already filled the needs of the offensive line, although we've continuously said they could use more for sure. But the immediate spots are filled. They've added a receiver in Williams, so there's not like that glaring they need to add a receiver at number 10. So they can do what teams always say they're going to do, which is take the best player. But you have a recent article out about who the most likely picks are. You have Brock Bowers circled as number 1, which obviously would make Aaron Rodgers happy to have that weapon at tight end. And then there's, after that, it's probably the offensive tackles we've talked about, right? But it depends who falls there too. Like, if it's Fuaga, did I even say that right?
Yeah.
He's Dane Brugler's number 4 offensive tackle. That's one thing. Maybe Brock Bowers is the obvious pick. But then if one of those higher offensive tackles falls, then maybe you go there. And maybe a guy like Adunze falls at wide receiver. So there's all these options. They're in a good place where a month ago, I think we would have said, they're going to have 3 obvious needs that they need to fill in that first round. Now there isn't one.
Yeah. I get, like, as you referenced, like, obviously you could argue they still need wide receiver and tackle because of who they added, but yeah, they have the starters in place. So you can go in and be like, okay, who's the best player we can get on the board? I put Brock Bowers there just because, with this ranking, I tried to emphasize this, and usually people understand it. It's not like a ranking of who I think is the best player or who I think they should pick or whatever. I just think the most likely based on who will be available and things like that. I go back and forth whether I think the Jets would actually take Bowers or not. I do think if I'm predicting like right this minute, I might go offensive tackle if they stayed at 10, but it just all depends on what happens in front of them. Like I feel like those top 3 receivers are going to get picked. And I think at least 3 quarterbacks and probably 4 will go in the top 10. But if a quarterback falls, then all of a sudden you have a great pick to trade back. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. Or if one of those receivers falls, you could scoop them up. I do think if they had their druthers, they would prefer to trade back, pick up a second round pick. That way you can get an offensive tackle and a receiver in the first 2 rounds. If Joe Alt falls to number 10, I think he's I think he's a possibility. Like he's somebody that would be hard to turn down. He's like 6'8", and he's the consensus like top tackle. I don't think everybody views him that way. But yeah, you know, they have real optionality here, and I think that's the biggest strength you can have. I should say, Boy Green just asked when we're having Dane Brugler on, and we are in discussions with Dane about getting.
We're negotiating. Dane's busy this time.
He's busy with the Beast, which, as Tim said, if we distracted him from finishing the Beast, they might fire us. So
yes, hopefully next week or maybe the week after. The Beast should be dropping. I believe it's next Wednesday. Don't quote me.
Oh baby,
but I believe it's next week. The Beast is dropping. So this week,
definitely don't quote you because it's definitely been known to get pushed back.
Yeah. But this week was basically don't bother Dane so he can finish the Beast week. So we'll let the master do his work. But
my draft season Bible. I cannot wait for it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll get him on. I'm curious what he thinks.
The crazy thing is we used to have Dane on in October. November,
yeah.
We haven't had him on since last year's draft, which even though the Jets season was a disaster, I guess it still speaks highly that we haven't talked about the draft until now.
Yeah, because it was a very strange season too. So it was nobody was really caring about the draft during the season. But yeah, so I think, and I'm working on a mock draft too. Like I wouldn't rule out either a trade back or a trade up. Like if we're going with the theory that like Joe Douglas is all in on winning this year, whatever about next year, I don't care about the money or the draft picks next year. Why not go up and get Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors if they're there at 5 or 6? Like trade a future second, whatever it is, whatever the draft value, because the 10th is a pretty valuable spot still. So a team like the Chargers, they really want to build up their roster. The Cardinals have a million holes. I would do it personally. And I know trading up for a receiver, I know there's arguments to be made against that because there's so many good receivers in these drafts these days, but those two guys are generational type receivers, I think. And you essentially have 2 number 1 receivers plus Mike Williams, who at his best is a very good number 2. So I would do that.
Without a second round pick, what do the Jets need to move from 10 to 5?
I mean, you could do a second round pick next year, I guess.
Next year, second.
Or next year's first, although I mean that the value changes a little bit, I guess, when you're going into future years. But
you're hoping that pick is 28, 29.
Yeah. So they'd have to give up a lot, certainly. But I don't know. I think it's worth it. And I think if Joe Douglas wants to, the offseason started, everybody accused both me and Joe Douglas of sleeping too much. And then within a few days, a week, everybody was I
think they've forgiven Joe. I don't
That's
think
what I'm saying. But if he wants
to
keep this momentum going, trading up and getting Marvin Harrison Jr., even if they lose every game, I don't think anybody would blame him at that point. I mean, they would, but you know what I mean. So I personally am all about trading up. If those guys fall to the spot, they might not. It might be all smoke with the JJ McCarthy stuff and all that. And if not that, I do whatever you can to trade back. I'm skeptical they'll be able to, as I've talked about, though. There are some teams that need offensive tackle. So if Joe Alt falls, or if somebody loves Fuaga or the kid from Penn State, like the Steelers, I know they need an offensive tackle. I think the Colts might. There's a couple teams that need offensive linemen. If you'll pick up a second round pick, trade back. You can still get Brian Thomas from LSU. You could still get Troy Fatino, the offensive lineman from Washington, who's pretty versatile. And then you also have a second round pick to address whatever position you didn't just pick, or get a starting safety. Trade up or trade back are my top 2 choices personally, unless you get lucky and one of those receivers are at 10. But as I sit here right now, I don't think that'll happen. So trade up or trade back. You're either trading back and getting more assets or trading up and getting rid of all your assets. So it's 2 wildly different things, but that's kind of where the Jets are at. They can add 2 quality depth pieces, or they can add a star. So
yeah, I was going to say either of those options I think is good, is smart. Either way, depending on, what presents itself, I could be on board with either of those things. I think though getting a second round pick would be huge to trade back, and maybe you could trade back, still get Bowers, get a second round pick. There's so many options there because of where they are and what they need. All right, few other news and notes to get to. We haven't discussed the Woody Johnson, Robert Salah supposed fight, verbal skirmish at the owners meeting that seems to be way overblown. What do you think, Zach? You want to weigh in?
To me, it's just especially once Woody chimed in on Twitter with trashing the NFL-owned NFL Network. I was just like, another like normal day in Jets sphere. Like it just can't stop. Like they don't even. I don't even blame them for any of what happened here, but it's just like this doesn't happen with other teams. Like it just doesn't. And I don't know if an argument happened. I would be surprised if it did, just knowing how Robert Salah and Woody Johnson operate, and both of them knowing they're around the entire NFL.
That's the thing that's crazy to me. These guys talk all the time. They've probably had plenty of fights behind closed doors, but
it was a weird report. And I like Colleen Wolfe. I don't know her personally. I'm not going to disparage her by any means. I just don't know that a secondhand conversation should have been shared in the way that it was just strange to me that she reported that thing, even if that wasn't her intention. But honestly, I'm not trying to criticize her. She was doing a podcast. It was also for entertainment purposes. Like she was having fun on the pod. Like I totally get it.
It's different than if she had tweeted out
she didn't double down or anything like that. But it was just another distraction / headline where, like I said, it's it seems like there's 2 things a week this off season where there's a signing and there's something weird happening every week. So it'd be nice to have usually this is the quiet time coming up. It'd be nice if they could give me a little. I have some PTO coming up, going to Woodstock, yearly trip with my girlfriend and my pup for my pup's birthday. She's turning 11 years old.
Wow.
And I would like to just unplug and not worry about anything. So,
you 100% just jinxed yourself.
I'm turning my phone off, and so if something happens, somebody else can take care of it. I'm telling my boss.
That's good.
Give me a break.
Tim and I will hop on here and just be
we'll cover it.
Ultimately, it was much ado about nothing, and the Jets are. What this comes down to, the Jets are an easy target right now. So people are going to take their chance to make fun of the Jets whenever they can, and I think that's what it was, more than even a report. And Jets fans are equally mad about how everybody's making fun of them all the time right now. So it's very contentious on the social media sphere. I would recommend not going on Twitter as much as you can. I would say if you're anybody, it's just bad for your health anyway. But anyway, yeah. And then I don't know what's next. What else we got to hit?
Justin Hardy.
Go
ahead, Marissa.
Before Justin Hardy and Michael's new teammate, Hardy, I do want to mention that you can quote me. According to Dane's Twitter, April 10th, I was correct.
There you go. So you didn't speak out of turn.
I did not speak out of turn. I knew I had read that or heard
and it's
that
actually
somewhere.
on. It's been promoted.
Gave himself a deadline there, I guess. Yeah.
So next Wednesday, a week from today.
Can't wait.
The Beast
and of course,
date.
Subscribers to The Athletic get access
free
to the Beast.
Yep. So all these different prospects we've been talking about. Dane, I think for the past, I don't know how many years, has not missed a player that has been drafted in the Beast.
Amazing.
It's
crazy. Yeah.
And I guess if people have no idea what we're talking about, the Beast is Dane's published draft preview that just lists. I don't know.
Draft Bible.
I think he's been doing it since before he was at the Athletic too.
Yeah.
I think he's been doing it since he was in high school. If I remember.
He's been doing it for a really long time.
Well, the best. I go back to it throughout the year and years later because he'll have details about these guys because he has conversations with everybody. I don't even know how he does that. I mean, we should grill him on specifics. I'm sure he's been grilled a million times about it. But
my favorite thing was so one year when we were at the draft for the Athletic Football Show, we looked up Dane had Michael in the draft and his little report, and I sent it to Michael. Michael said that was very accurate. His arm length, and what was his strengths and what was his weaknesses, and so that was Michael came out in 2017. So he's been doing it at least that long. So
and it's always fascinating seeing what he said about people whether they work out or not, because he usually hits well, if they do this, then they can become this kind of player, or if they don't figure out this part, then they won't, and that usually is what happens.
And he also
maybe his rankings aren't always perfect, but nobody's are. It's all personal.
Of course, you don't know what's
and the other side of it, the the family side of things, or what players have gone through.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He has details in there that
it's amazing.
You can't really get anywhere else. So
totally,
it's amazing.
You're not gonna find anything like that anywhere else. So we love Dane. Huge fans of Dane. So if you're not subscribing,
and he will be joining the Can't Wait soon to tell us more about it.
When he finishes
Yeah, when he finishes.
Justin Hardy is joining the Cleveland Browns.
Yes.
Ohio native.
New teammate of Michael Dunn, like you mentioned, Marissa.
Mhm.
But it's a loss for the Jets, no doubt. This is a guy who I remember when the Jets signed him, it was a commitment to special teams because the Jets special teams hadn't been great. And this was a commitment where they were signing a guy specifically for that role, which not all teams do. And he fulfilled that role and he was great. And obviously the Jets special teams have been better. And now this guy who's kind of led that charge is gone. I feel like there is a different personality to this Jets special teams unit than there used to be, though.
Yeah.
With Boyer in charge and everything, and I'm sure they'll still be good this year. But it's tough seeing Hardy leave.
Yeah, and I got some crap from some Jets fans on Twitter about like saying it was a big. I said it was a big loss for Brant Boyer. By the way, I didn't even necessarily say for the team, but it is. Like he was like double and triple teamed as a gunner on special teams, which I think is an underrated thing. Like obviously, this isn't going to be the difference from them winning 10 games or 12 games or anything like that. But like, it's all those like little things that good teams do. And he does those little things. And he got a few too many penalties, but when he was on the field, he was very good. And he got hurt last year, and they're probably letting him go because Irv Charles is a young guy they have who filled in pretty well. They signed Isaiah Oliver from the 49ers, who I think will play a pretty big special teams role. They have Brendan Eccles. They'll probably draft some guys late in the draft. Usually the day 3 picks for the Jets are always like special teams guys. Like they're going to fill it out. But yeah, and I think it's a big lot. He was a special teams captain. He was a really like a voice in that locker room in general. He's very close with DJ Reed and Sauce and like those corners. Like the locker room's going to miss him. I don't know what the numbers were that he got. I do know a video has been resurfacing of after the Browns killed the Jets, of him going up to Joe Flacco and be like, get a Super Bowl for my city or whatever, because he's a Ohio kid. I think I don't know where in Ohio he's from, but
I think Cleveland. I could be wrong, but
I think that's right. Yeah. Michael will love him though. He's definitely a great locker room guy. The media, Zach Jackson will love him too. He would always he wanted to talk to the media. We would go stretches without talking to him, and then he got made the All-Pro or whatever. And he's like, none of you guys ever go up to my locker besides this person and this person. Like he'd call people out for not talking to him more. So he's a character, and they're gonna miss him, I think.
Yeah, he is a
Taylor Delgado said, did the new kickoff rules affect the decision at all?
Maybe. I also just think the Jets, we're mostly budget shopping this offseason too, and you have to save money here and there at a certain spots, and they didn't prioritize him because they're probably going to have Irv Charles play a bigger role, like I said, and they signed Isaiah Oliver. So I don't think they made him a priority. I'd heard a few weeks ago that he probably wasn't going to come back. I wasn't ready to report it or anything because, those kind of things can be ever changing. Ashton Davis, another guy that as of now hasn't returned, and he's a key special teams guy. So it's going to be a new look special teams group, though they did bring back Morstead and Zerline, which is the moves that the fan base cared about more, I would say.
Marissa, I cut you off there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say he is a Cleveland native. So
there you go.
Cool getting to play in your home city. So
yeah, great for him.
Yeah.
Am I missing anything?
I don't think they've done anything else. I would say as we go forward, the spots that I have my eye on of them still adding veterans, maybe they'll wait till after the draft, would be backup running back. Though there's not as many good ones because they keep getting scooped up. But Zeke Elliott's still out there. I think he'd be good. I think they need a veteran swing tackle. They might just be waiting to see if they get a tackle 10th overall. I know they love Carter Warren, but I would get a veteran swing tackle, and they probably need another safety. So those are kind of the 3 spots I have my eye on.
All right. And we'll keep our eyes out for them as well. We'll see. I'm sure. Who knows? We say we'll be back next week with Dane, but this is the Jets, so you never know. Before that, we will see. But definitely keep your eye open. We'll let you know when the next episode's coming up as we get closer and closer to the 2024 NFL Draft. Thanks to everybody for joining us here on the Can't Wait podcast.